What's going on, everybody? It's your man Louie T here on back-to-back days on the Louie T Network podcast. That's a rarity for me. I don't usually do podcast episodes on back-to-back days, but I really wanted to get this in prior to most teams hitting training camp. And if I don't do it this week, then it won't get done because teams are already starting to show up. Rookies are starting to report for certain teams. Some already have veterans and rookies reporting. And so I want to get this on the books before training camp gets underway. These, as I mentioned yesterday, did the NFC. Today, we're going to do the AFC power rankings for the conference. And then on Friday, I'm going to put the two together and give you my power rankings for the entire National Football League pre-training camp. Now, again, subject to change. Anything can happen. And we'll revisit this probably prior to the season, maybe. Again, the preseason isn't what it once was. So it's not like you're going to have this different feeling about some of these teams heading into the regular season. And I'll take it a step further. Last year, the Steelers killed it in the preseason. I was like, oh my God, Kenny Pickett has figured it out. Kenny Pickett gets into the regular season. 49ers stomp a mud hole in him week one. The rest is history. Kenny Pickett is no longer in Pittsburgh. He's now in Philadelphia. So again, you can only take so much away from the preseason. Take it with a grain of salt. That said, we're going to talk about that top 10 quarterback list put out by ESPN. They talked to coaches, executives, scouts, and they compiled a list of quarterbacks. We're going to discuss that today as well. In addition to a number of topics. So y'all know what it is, man. You locked into the Louie T Network podcast that starts now. The Louie T Network is powered by MusicHead University. MusicHeads, classes in session. Turn me up. Enroll on YouTube now. Link is in the description. Who else could it be but me, your man, Louie T? Welcome to the 432nd installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I, of course, am your set man, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Y'all know what it is. Back like cook crack for the second night in a row. Yesterday, we knocked down the NFC power rankings heading into training camp. Today, we do the pre-camp AFC rankings. So we'll get to that a little bit later on in the show. I talked about those ESPN top 10 quarterback rankings that they put out the other day. Pat McAfee talked about it on his show. Had some interesting things to say there. We're going to take a look at that list. Do you agree with it? Do you disagree? So we'll kind of go back and forth with that. But before we get into anything football related, I do want to talk Olympic basketball real quick because we talked about that briefly on the program yesterday. My guy, Chris McLaughlin, shout out to Chris, asked me about the Olympic team and did I expect them to bring home the gold? I told him, yes, I do. And, you know, they had a minor scare the other day, but they escaped with a win over Australia. Then they bounced back and beat Serbia, which was supposed to be a really good test for them. You know, that team features Joker, the league MVP. And they beat them up by 26 points. And I told you, I expect them to win gold, and I honestly don't expect them to really be tested a whole hell of a lot. There may be one game or two in there that, you know, it's tight for a little while, but they pull away late. I don't expect them to lose any games. I expect them to win the gold medal. I'm going to say something that I don't think it's controversial. But this is how I feel. This is the most talented team since the original Dream Team. I don't know how you guys feel about that. The Redeem Team was pretty good, but this team is better than the Redeem Team. So I think this is the best team they've sent to the Olympics since 1992 in the original Dream Team. That team had an assortment of players, but it was a great mixture of old, wily veterans, the young upstarts, the new kids on the block, if you will, passing the torch, the Birds and the Magics. We're passing that torch to the Ewings and the Jordans and the Pippins and the Stockton and the Malones, and those guys are going to run with the baton, if you will, right? This kind of feels like that with LeBron and Steph and all of those guys. This is their farewell swan song Olympic, run. For Steph, it's the only time he's ever been. We've never had a shooter go to the Olympics like Steph Curry. At any moment, he can catch fire and single-handedly destroy an opponent and create distance like he did in this game. He scored 18 points in 11 minutes. Like, we already know what Steph is capable of. If he gets hot, there isn't a team in the country, and there isn't a team in the world that can beat this US team. Not to mention, you still have LeBron James, who's still one of the best players in the world. Kevin Durant's not even playing right now, and I don't know if he'll be healthy enough to help them. But if he's playing, you add him to the mix. Anthony Edwards, Devin Booker, the list goes on and on. Anthony Davis, Bam Adebayo hit 3 threes in the game today. Again, I don't expect him to do that, but Drew Holiday, we got some of the best defensive players in Holiday, and especially on the perimeter, and Holiday and Derek White. Like, this team is loaded. Jason Tatum, yeah, right. Like, this team is going to win gold. And again, I don't expect it to be close when it's all said and done, but we'll see. I think the 26-point victory versus Serbia was a message to the rest of the Olympics. Like, hey, yeah, we had a little bit of a slip up the other day. Don't think anything of it. Like, don't think you can get us, because you can't. So this was just a little bit of a reminder. Hey, yeah, we the best. So anyway, I digress. Let's get to the gem dropping session, shall we? Yeah, I think we shall. Let me drop this gem on your melon. Open your mind, let your conscience be free. You're now rolling with your man, Louie T double E. Let me open you up, get you thinking a little bit. So let's get to the top 10 list. I want to address that first. The ESPN top 10 list of quarterbacks. They interviewed GMs, executives, scouts, coaches around the league. These lists are often flawed. You don't know how many people they talk to. You don't know who they exactly talk to. You have people that are biased. So again, I don't like this guy, I'm not going to vote for him type stuff. So you never know what you're getting yourself into. But there is a framework here from which to work from. And I want to take a look at this list and discuss it with you guys and see what you think. So here are the top 10 quarterbacks in the NFL, according to ESPN's poll, essentially, where they talked to executive scouts and coaches. And this is the list that they were able to compile after those conversations. So as you can see, Patrick Mahomes is at the top. Duh, go figure. Everybody knew that. Joe Burrow would be my number 2 as well. Josh Allen is third. I don't think there's much discrepancy there. I don't know if anybody's arguing 1, 2, and 3. I honestly don't think you should argue 4 either. 2-time MVP Lamar Jackson at 4. This is where it gets interesting after 4. And this is where you can start, moving guys around, shuffling the deck if you want, knock yourself out. I don't know if I would have taken anybody out of the top 10, maybe 1 or 2 guys. Are they properly ordered? I would have had Herbert at 5, right? Like, Stafford is cool, and we know what Stafford is, but at this point of his career, is he better than Justin Herbert? Nah, not for my money, right? You know, what's funny is there's still this contingency out there that's like, what has Justin Herbert ever done? Justin Herbert. And then they like to throw his overall record at you as if that's supposed to sway you in some way, shape, or form. Like, oh, look, his overall record, he's 32-30 as a starter. What has Justin Herbert ever done? Or he's 30-32. He doesn't even have a winning. I don't know what his record is. I don't give a shit. I've watched Justin Herbert play more than enough football to know what this guy is fully capable of. And I think you're going to see it this year with a head coach that is going to maximize the talent on that roster. He's at 6 on this list is Justin Herbert. CJ Stroud, fresh off of one of the best rookie seasons we've ever seen, is positioned at number 7. Aaron Rodgers, at the ripe old age of 96, is at number 8, coming off of an ACL. Jared Goff, with his trip to the NFC Championship game a season ago, is at 9, and Dak Prescott rounds out the top 10 at number 10. Honorable mentions among the quarterbacks who did not make the top 10: Brock Purdy, who has been to the NFC Championship game and the Super Bowl in his first 2 years as a full-time starter. Jordan Love, 1 year of starting, 1 division crown, or excuse me, 1 playoff berth and 1 playoff win. Jalen Hurts just went to the Super Bowl a couple years ago, made it to the playoffs. As a starter, he's been to the postseason each of the 3 years that he has been the full-time starter. Tua Tagovailoa helped the Dolphins to the playoffs 2 years ago. Didn't play in the playoff game. Obviously, he battled concussions a couple of years back, but he was a huge part of them, making it to the postseason that year. Last year, he stayed healthy, had the best season of his career, led them to the postseason. Did not win, but played really well throughout the season last year. Kirk Cousins, first year in Atlanta, coming off of an ACL tear, and we know what he's fully capable of when he's healthy. He was playing ridiculous football last year prior to the injury and played really well in Minnesota before leaving in free agency this past offseason to join the Falcons. And then Trevor Lawrence, who had a step back season last year after making the postseason back in 2022 for the first time in his career, having that massive come from behind victory over the Chargers, winning a playoff game and nearly going to Arrowhead and winning. Dealt with some injuries last year, didn't play up to the standard that a lot of people had set for him. Did get paid this offseason, but nonetheless, he was an honorable mention as well. So you have 16 quarterbacks. So half of the league's starters are on this list, essentially, or at least on this graphic, but only 10 of them can be in the top 10. So what says you, right? Is this an accurate top 10 list? Are the right 10 guys in it? Maybe not in the order that you would position them, but are the right 10 guys there? Would you take someone out? Would you take a couple of guys out? Who would you insert, et cetera, et cetera? I'll give you my thoughts on this list quickly. I just want to say a couple of things about this list, though. Here's the first thing that stands out to me about this list. One, you have to be able to throw from the pocket. For as much as we make about mobility and the ability to create off script, when the play breaks down, can you extend and make something happen? Can you make something happen off schedule? Can you use your legs to be a factor and a threat? Yes, you do need to be somewhat mobile. If it's 3rd and 5, you need to be able to run for 6 or 7 yards. But the notion that you have to be this athletic dynamo to play the position is a farce. And I think this list is a testament to that. Mahomes is a killer with his legs. He may not rush for 100 yards like Lamar Jackson, but we've seen him time and time and time again break your back on 3rd and 9 with a 15-yard scramble. We've seen him, some of his biggest plays, one of the biggest plays in the Super Bowl. The last two Super Bowls were scrambles, right? Big scramble against the 49ers down the stretch and in overtime. Big scramble against the Eagles in that Super Bowl as well. So some of his biggest plays are scrambles, right? Joe Burrow has the ability to tuck it and run. That's not something he does very often, but Severio says, was Rodgers, it might have been an Achilles. I don't keep track of these injuries anymore. Achilles, ACL, they're not the same. So I can't say they're all the same, but they're both major injuries that require surgery. One's to the knee, one's to the Achilles. I think Rodgers might have been an Achilles. Hell, Kirk's might have been an Achilles. Again, normally with quarterbacks, it's usually the Achilles and not the ACL. But again, I don't keep up with these things. I'd be lying to you if I told you I knew what it was exactly. It's one or the other. But Burrow can move. He's not the most mobile, but he's mobile enough. Plenty of mobility there. Allen, we know, is a guy that will hurt you with his legs big time. We know about Jackson. He's the most prolific running quarterback in the league right now, and so forth and so forth. But all of these guys on this list, for the most part, are stone cold killers from the pocket. And Lamar is continuing to progress there. He had one of his best seasons from the pocket this past season, which is part of the reason why he was able to hoist the MVP trophy. But when you look at this list, guys like Jared Goff and, Rodgers at his ripe old age, Prescott is not much of a runner these days. Stafford isn't much of a runner these days. You're seeing guys on this list who will dissect you from the confines of the pocket, right? So that's the first thing that stuck out to me is you got to be able to deliver the football from the pocket. You got to be able to analyze NFL defenses, understand what it is they're trying to do, know where to go with the football, and deliver it accurately, on time, consistently, right? And that's what this list kind of spells out. Another thing that was pretty interesting to me is when you look at this list, you can be a really good quarterback, but you have to have some sort of success in the postseason. And the only guy that really doesn't have any postseason success is Dak Prescott. Now, Justin Herbert also doesn't have a lot of postseason success. He doesn't have any, as a matter of fact. He only has one career start in the postseason, and that was a loss, as I mentioned, to Jacksonville in come from behind fashion for the Jaguars when they came back. I think they were leading in that game 27-7 before the Jaguars came back and beat them in that game. But when you look at this list, Mahomes, we know what he's been to the AFC Championship game. What is it now? 6 years in a row? Okay, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 7 years in a row and counting, right? Trying to do something no other NFL team or quarterback has done in NFL history, and that's win 3 Super Bowls consecutively. So we know what Mahomes has been. Burrow, when healthy, I've continued to make this statement. I'll continue to sing the praises of Joe Burrow and make sure that people don't forget that when Joe Burrow starts and finishes a season, he's been no worse than the AFC Championship game. It's a pretty high hit rate. Okay, you can say what you want about Burrow. You can talk about him not finishing seasons, being injured. Those are facts. What is also a fact is when he does start and finish the season, it's AFC Championship game or bust, essentially. They went to the Super Bowl and the AFC Championship game in the 2 years where he started and finished. Allen has been to an AFC Championship game. He's had postseason success. Ultimately, not enough, but plenty of postseason success. And you understand what he is as a quarterback. Lamar Jackson hasn't had a ton of postseason success, but he has played in the AFC Championship game now. And he's been multiple times to the postseason. And He's getting closer and closer. Last year, I felt like him and Allen, that was their best shot. And I think both of them blew it. They both had home games against the Chiefs and didn't get it done. But again, both have played in the AFC Championship game. Stafford has won a Super Bowl, as we know, and that kind of solidified his legacy. Talked about that yesterday and plenty of times on this very podcast. Herbert is, along with Dak Prescott, the two guys on this list that have little to no postseason success. Herbert has zero, right? But he hasn't been a bunch of times. But that's subject to change with Jim Harbaugh, coming on the scene now. We'll talk about that tonight. CJ Stroud in his first season wins the division, wins a home playoff game, goes on the road and loses in the divisional round to the Ravens. So he, in just one season, already has some postseason success under his belt. Aaron Rodgers, we know what the resume is there. Not nearly enough Super Bowl victories or appearances for that matter for Rodgers, but the resume speaks for itself. He's been to a gajillion NFC championship games. We'll see if he can add a trip to the AFC championship game and maybe even another appearance in the Super Bowl to his resume. Jared Goff has been to a Super Bowl, and now with the Lions, an NFC championship game. Keep in mind that before Goff got to Detroit, this was a franchise that had not won the division in franchise history, had not won the NFC North version of the division, had not won the division since 91 when it was the NFC Central, had not won a playoff game since 1991. So there was a long drought there. He comes in there, wins the division, wins a home playoff game, two of them, in fact, gets to the NFC Championship game and was within 5 to 6 minutes of helping the Detroit Lions advance to the Super Bowl. Would have been his second organization he has led to the Super Bowl. So Jared Goff has had plenty of postseason success. And then there's Dak Prescott. And we know about the failures of Prescott and the Cowboys in the postseason. At the end of the day, he has not played his best football in the postseason, but he has been a regular season warrior when it comes to winning football games. He has been outstanding. And look, in order to have postseason success, you have to first get to the postseason. And Dak Prescott has done that a number of times throughout his career. The honorable mention guys, Purdy has been, as I mentioned, in 2 years of starting, NFC Championship game, Super Bowl. So very similar to Joe Burrow in the sense that if he starts and finishes the season, he's going to at least the NFC Championship game. Jordan Love, one season, one playoff appearance, a win on the road, and then they had the 49ers on the ropes and let them off the hook. Talked about that yesterday, but he's already had postseason success. Hurts went to the Super Bowl in 2022, and you could argue outplayed Patrick Mahomes in that Super Bowl loss, but it's a loss nonetheless. And the funny thing with Hurts is, we'll get to this in a second. I'll save that for the next portion of my conversation. But he's had postseason success, albeit only in 1 year, right? He's been to the postseason 3 years in a row. But in 21, he was bounced by the Buccaneers in the first round. In 2023, he was bounced by the Buccaneers in Wild Card Weekend once again. So sandwiched in between is that run to the Super Bowl where they were dominant and just fell short. Tua Tagovailoa been to the playoffs once as the starter, but again, he helped the Dolphins get there in 2022, but he was injured and did not participate, but got them there this past year in 2023, didn't get it done on the road at Kansas City. Kirk Cousins has been, much like Dak Prescott, they're very similar to me in terms of their ability to get it done in the regular season. There's been a lack of postseason success for Kirk. he just, unlike Dak, who's had a ton of opportunities, Kirk hasn't had as many bites at the apple. But even when he has had those opportunities, he's only won one postseason game, right? That was against the New Orleans Saints like 3 years ago, in overtime. I want to say it was a fade ball to Kyle Rudolph, who pushed off like nobody's business, and they didn't call it. But yeah, Kirk has not had postseason success, which is probably why he's on the outside looking in of this list. And then Trevor Lawrence is a guy that, as again I mentioned, won a postseason game, did regress last year, but a lot of people still think he's a really good quarterback and that he has a lot of good football ahead of him. And I agree with that assessment as well. So when you get to the 10 guys on the list, you see that there's also an attachment of postseason success, um, for the most part. But here's the thing that I find interesting before I get to the list itself and what I would, any changes that I might make to it. If you're an elite quarterback, like a Mahomes, a Burrow, a Allen, or a Jackson, I'm not saying that you're bulletproof and that a lack of success won't stick to you, but you're going to be given a lot more leeway. For instance, Joe Burrow didn't finish the season last year. Who cares? He's still the second best quarterback in the NFL, right? According to these executive scouts and coaches. I'd agree with that. Josh Allen, let's say that the Bills struggle this year and they don't even make it to the playoffs. Will Josh Allen no longer be a top 5 quarterback? I don't think that's going to be the case. Lamar Jackson, before last year, we were talking about injury concerns. We were talking about his lack of postseason success. We were talking about him not finishing the season the last 3 years. He was still a top 5 quarterback, right? I think after those 4, however, all bets are off. Here's my biggest example. If they were to do this list this time last year, Jalen Hurts would have probably been in the top 5. Coming off of that Super Bowl appearance, playing as well as he did last year, being in the MVP discussion, just missing out on winning the MVP, playing the way that he did in the Super Bowl despite the loss, he was probably a top 5 quarterback. He has one season where he starts 10-1 and played really well in a lot of those victories and was the reason they came back and won a lot of those games. And they've collapsed down the stretch, and look where he is. He's not even in the top 10. Now, I'm not saying that they're incorrect in not placing him in the top 10, but you see how fickle that is? Jared Goff wasn't in the top 10 this time last season, but he did just put together one of the best seasons in Detroit Lions franchise history. So that does account for his ascension into the top 10, but Jared Goff was not in this discussion a season. You might as well have packaged him up with Derek Carr and put all of them in the same discussion this time last year. Obviously, Stroud wasn't here this time last year. Herbert was I'd say Herbert was higher on this list. If you were to do this last year, Jackson probably wasn't even in the top 5 this time last year. He probably was on the outside looking in at 6. I think Herbert and Hurts were probably rounding out the top 5 along with Mahomes, Burrow, and Allen. So it's just funny to watch this list. Prescott was probably always at 10, never really moving around much. Obviously, Stroud's ascension pushes guys like Prescott down the list, but it's just funny to see how this goes, right? I think they got the first 4 right in the exact order that they belong. I wouldn't touch the first 4. I've already told you I would take Herbert and move him up to 5 if it were me. I think Stafford does belong in the top 10, but I don't think he should be as high as 5. That's crazy to me. Um, I think CJ Stroud was spectacular, but does he deserve to be 7 after one season? What if CJ Stroud regresses this year and comes back to the mean and plays like Tua Tagovailoa or like Kyler Murray, or he has a, let's just say he has a Trevor Lawrence-esque season this year where he takes a step back, maybe he deals with a couple of nagging injuries, but overall, or he stays completely healthy and he just plays like Trevor Lawrence, inconsistent, up and down. Um, then what? Right? Like, I just think it's early on Stroud. Yes, he was spectacular last year, and the likelihood is he's going to replicate what he did last year and play really well and put the Texans in a position to not only make the postseason but make noise when they get there. But it's a small sample size. I just need to see it again, right? But he's at 7, and not that I'm not killing him for that, right? I'd push him down the list. Same with Stafford. Um, Rodgers is a wild card because if he's healthy, I think most people believe he can still play and play at a relatively high level. Um, I myself would put Jalen Hurts in the top 10. And I get it. You don't love him as a pocket passer. You don't love certain attributes that he may not possess. I just know the guy wins a bunch of football games. I know he makes winning plays. I know he's had a lot of turmoil around him from a coaching staff perspective. There's been no continuity whatsoever. Yes, the Eagles have put a good roster around him, damn good roster. Excellent offensive line. You could argue the best in football. Bunch of weapons at receiver, a nice, tight end. Always keeping a good stable of running backs, et cetera, et cetera. He's always had good talent around him, but are we knocking teams for that? Because if that were the case, what are we talking about with Cincinnati and Kansas City and Buffalo and Baltimore and the talent that they've put around their passers, right? Like that argument always falls on deaf ears for me. So I think Hurts, because of the guys in that honorable mention category, he's done it multiple times. Purdy has done it multiple times as well. Um, I think guys like Hurts and Purdy, because of the teams that are built around them, and they don't quote unquote take over ball games, and they aren't the guys that have this sexy stat line, or they're not going out and slinging it for 392 yards and 4 touchdowns. So those are the guys that the team carries them, right? Or the supporting cast, because Purdy's turning around and handing it off to Christian McCaffrey. He's going to be penalized for that because the 49ers defensively are really good. He's going to be penalized for that. I saw Purdy grow up last year, especially in the postseason. He was awful in the first half of that Packers game and largely responsible for the deficit that they faced at one point in that game. And I saw him strap that team to his back. I saw him make big time throws. I saw him scramble a couple of times when the team needed him to. I saw him take them down the field when they had to have it and get it done. I saw him do the same thing against the Detroit Lions. And so I saw him come of age. I've seen Hurts play in some big spots and get it done. And so golf is interesting because this isn't his first rodeo. And as much as I wanted to shit on Jared Goff, I think it's time we give him his proper and just due. At this point, I think Jared Goff is legit. I remember when that trade was made, and I was very dismissive. Like, oh yeah, he's somebody's got to be there to take these losses while they figure out what the direction is in Detroit, right? New GM, new head coach, a roster that's okay, but it's not, gonna really wow anybody. They're gonna take some lumps in Detroit. Somebody's got to take those lumps. Might as well be Jared Goff. Why not? Boy, was I wrong about that. So I'd put Herbert at 5. I think I'd stick with Rodgers. I know he's coming off the injury, but I think I'd put Rodgers at 6. I'd put Stafford at 7, Golf at 8, Stroud at 9, and I'd leave Prescott right where he is at 10. If I were to keep the list the way that it is in terms of the 10 guys, but my list would look like this: Mahomes at 1, Burrow at 2, Allen at 3, Jackson at 4, Herbert at 5. I would then insert Jalen Hurts into this equation, and I'd put him at 6. I'd take Stafford and I'd put him at 7. I'd leave Rodgers at 8. I would take Purdy, put him at 9, and I'd take Jared Goff and I would put him at 10. And Dak Prescott would be out of my top 10. That's what my list would look like right now with the quarterbacks. And again, Purdy's a byproduct of Kyle Shanahan's offense, and he's in a great system for his skill set. Whatever, like that's all a part of this dynamic. No one says Brock Purdy's Mahomes, Burrow, or Allen, right? Those guys are probably good irregardless of system. Okay, the systems don't make those quarterbacks; they make the system essentially. They are the system. How about that? That doesn't make you a good quarterback, though. That makes you an elite, special breed of quarterback. Not everybody is built to be that. The rest of the guys on this list aren't that. Stafford isn't that, right? Herbert isn't that. Stroud isn't that. Not yet, at least. We'll see. Rodgers was once upon a time that, right? But I think Purdy deserves to be in the top 10. So does Jalen Hurts. I probably would take Kirk Cousins over Dak Prescott, to be honest with you. That's just me personally. That's just how I feel. But Prescott wouldn't be in the top 10. And I would also push down a number of guys, and Stroud wouldn't be in the top 10 yet either. So again, my list would be Mahomes at 1, Burrow at 2, Allen at 3, Jackson at 4, Herbert at 5. I'd insert Jalen Hurts at 6. I would then put Stafford in at 7. Leave Rodgers where he is at 8. I would then put in Brock Purdy at 9 and push Jared Goff down to 10. That's what I would do. Stroud would be the first guy on the outside looking in at number 11. Then you'd probably have Prescott there behind him at 12. And then you could start to, as a matter of fact, I'd put Cousins at 12 and then Prescott at 13. And then you could slot the rest of those guys wherever you like. Love, Tagovailoa, Lawrence, knock yourself out. Have fun with that. But that's what I would do. What says you? Leave it down in the comment section. I don't think they're that far off with this list. The quarterback position, and I thought that Pat McAfee did a great job of talking about how dependent the quarterback position is, and how fickle we as fans and, people in the media and those who like to talk about the quarterback position, how fickle we can be. Quarterbacks get all the praise when they win, they get all the blame when they lose. And it's a very dependent position. It's also the most important in sports. But he gave an example of Andrew Luck when he was in Indianapolis. They would be down a ton of times and Luck would bring them back almost every single time. He said, but me as the punter, I'm at the bottom of the totem pole in terms of importance on the roster. And we didn't do a very lot of, very many. He said we didn't do a whole hell of a lot of punting, but I might have to punt late in the ball game and I might shank it. And it might set up the team to be in field goal range to make a kick that pushed the game out of reach. Maybe they were up, 6 at the time. And if Luck, the defense is able to come on the field, get a stop, Luck gets it back, he goes down the field, scores a touchdown, extra point, and they win by 1. Now, because of the shank punt, they got great field position. They get a couple first downs, they kick a field goal, and they take a 9-point lead and ultimately win the game, right? Now it's out of reach. He used the example of Brock Purdy last year on the road at Cleveland. Cleveland had this ridiculously efficient record at home last year, and they were a great defensive team. I don't know if they lost a home regular season game last year, but the 49ers lost Deebo Samuel in that game, lost Trent Williams in that game, as we know, and ended up going on to lose 3 in a row without them in the lineup. And a lot of people put the losses on the shoulders of Brock Purdy and talked about how he didn't step up and look, in those people's defense, Purdy had turnovers during that 3-game losing streak, but they should have beat the Browns. He took them down the field at the end of that game, made throw after throw, including one to Brandon Ayuk for a nice chunk that set them up with in the position to kick the game-winning field goal. And their rookie kicker, who was really good in Jake Moody last season, he missed, and they lost. He makes the kick, they win. He missed, they lost. They went on to lose 2 more games in a row, and a lot of that fell on the shoulders of Purdy, but if Jake Moody makes that kick, do they then go the next week on the road and lose to Minnesota? Probably not. Probably not. Do they lose the following week at home against Cincinnati? Maybe. Maybe not. So, again, I think it's interesting. This conversation is always interesting. Talking quarterbacks is always interesting, but I hope one day, and one day soon, my team's quarterback's name is somewhere on this graphic, preferably with a number beside his name. That would mean that we're in pretty damn good shape. That is for certain. So let's get to our next segment of the show, and that's social media maneuvers. I'm a midnight marauder. Y'all know what it is, man. You know how this works. If you're out there and you want your comment read on the air, use the hashtag LouieTLive to have your comment read on the air. If it is pertinent, we will discuss it later on in the show if time permits. If you want to ensure that your comment is read, super chats are the way to ensure that that happens. You jump to the front of the line and we will discuss your comment. So, with that said, I am going to get to the AFC. I think I left them up. Uh-oh. Let's see if y'all give me 1 second. I got to do this without y'all seeing it. Give me 1 second. All right, I'm back. I wasn't going to be able to do that without y'all seeing it, so I had to take a quick sabbatical. But let's go through this list real quick. And talk about the AFC as a conference and where I rank all 16 teams. We did this yesterday with the NFC. Now we're going to do it with the AFC. So let's go through this quickly. start at number 16, no brainer. New England Patriots. Um, they're starting anew. And I don't want to say this was long overdue because Belichick built up enough equity to be able to F up what he had built in New England. And so it had run its course, though. And we can sit here and do the whole Belichick Brady thing, but I think we figured out that Brady was a massive part of the success in New England, which we already knew. But they poorly and they gravely mismanaged Mac Jones. Mac Jones didn't help the situation, but boy, did they bungle that whole situation with Mac Jones. Boy, that didn't go the way that it was supposed to go. The Patriots are in at 16. They got a brand new head coach and Jerod Mayo. They have a brand new quarterback in Drake May. He won't be starting this season off as the signal caller. He will be backing up Jacoby Brissett, who will act as a bridge. They've got a lot of rebuilding to do in New England, and it's going to take some time, and they're going to take some lumps in the process. So as of right now, they're the worst team in the conference. They're going to be a lot more competitive than they were a season ago. That is for sure. I just don't think it's going to equate to very many victories. And eventually we will see Drake May in 2024. The question is, when exactly will we see Drake May? Coming in at number 15, the Tennessee Titans. They got a brand new head coach. And generally, the teams at the bottom of the list are going to have brand new head coaches. You saw that in the NFC with teams like the Panthers at the bottom and the Commanders, and the Giants were one of the few teams that didn't have a new coach. Vikings didn't have a new coach, but there was a lot of change. We're either talking about uncertainty at the quarterback position, or we're talking about, you know, a brand new staff and lots of changes internally that are going to affect the product on the field. In the case of the Titans, much like the Patriots, they're hitting the reset button, a hard reset. Mike Vrabel was one of the longer tenured coaches in the NFL, had done a lot of good things, had some really good seasons, a lot of success, but they felt like it was time to move in a different direction. So they did. They went out and gave the job to Callahan, who was the offensive coordinator in Cincinnati. And it was a very underrated, under the radar, low key signing there, and so, or higher. And so I wonder how that's going to go. He got his dad on board, Bill Callahan, to coach up the offensive line and things of that nature. So it's going to be fun to see what that Titans offense looks like. There's no more Derrick Henry there in Tennessee. And you know what? I'm actually really excited to see Will Levis. He showed flashes last year. So I think the Titans will be interesting, if nothing else. But I think they've got a long way to go. And I think they're going to be one of those teams. Like, there are certain teams that you see on the schedule and you go, hey, if we're serious about making noise, we have to beat them. These are the two teams in the AFC that if you see them on your schedule and you're serious about winning 10, 11, 12, 13, dare I say 14 games, you have to beat these teams. When we get to the end of the season, somebody's got to be 3-14. Somebody's got to be 4-13. These are the types of teams that should be 3-14, 4-13, 2-15 if it goes off the rails. It's their job to not allow themselves to be the doormat of the NFL. But I think the Patriots and the Titans, if Will Levis is good, there will be no discussions of being the doormats. When you play in a division like they play in that's wide open, like nobody has planted the flag in the AFC South. I mean, yes, the Texans had a great season last year, but I don't think the Titans, Jags, or Colts are looking at the Texans and saying, we got no shot, right? Um, you can compete in that division. You don't have to be 3-14 or 4 when you play in a division like that. But if the Titans don't hit it with Will Levis, that's exactly what they'll be. So we'll keep our eyes on that. But they got a whole new setup going on there. New offensive coordinator, new defensive coordinator, new head coach, et cetera, et cetera. No more Derrick Henry. So, it's a changing of the guard, similar to New England with no Belichick, and all of that good stuff. So you get to 14, and it's the Denver Broncos. Has Sean Payton done anything right since he's gotten to Denver? Anything? I don't know if he has. Have have the Broncos done anything right since they hired George Patton as their, GM? Have the Waltons done anything right since they bought the team and took ownership? There are a lot of questions in Denver. They're paying Russell Wilson a ton of money to stay away at this point. And so, um, hopefully this is the start of them getting some things right. We'll see, right? Um, they drafted Bo Nix. I actually think he's a good fit for Sean Payton's offense. We'll see if he's able to start week 1. Right now, I have him penciled in as one of the 3 quarterbacks that I expect as rookies to start week 1, along with Jaden Daniels and Caleb Williams. We'll see if that ends up being the case or not. They're going to give, their quarterbacks an opportunity. Remember, they traded for Zach Wilson from the Jets. So he's going to get an opportunity to be in the mix, and we'll see what happens. Still don't feel like Peyton has really put his thumbprint on this Broncos offense. The defense has been hit or miss. They just haven't put it together. They had that one stretch last year where they won like 5 in a row, and all of a sudden we're right in the middle of the playoff hunt. But they faltered down the stretch. We all know what happened with Russell Wilson. They ended up benching him final 2 games of the season, so forth and so forth. They had that ugly loss, what really ultimately derailed their um, comeback story was an ugly loss to the New England Patriots at home. I want to say it was a Sunday night. I think it was a Sunday night. And again, you just can't afford to lose, and they did. But that was the story of their season. There were some ugly losses, including giving up 70 to the Miami Dolphins. Yeah, the Broncos have had a rough go of it here over the last 2 seasons, but we'll see what happens this year with Denver. I just don't have any confidence right now in their quarterback position, and I don't think their defense is good enough to overcome the shortcomings of their quarterback position right now. And then you take it a step further. They play in a brutal division with the best team in football in the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chargers have gotten immensely better just off the strength of their coach. And the Raiders are much better coached now. I don't know how much better they are from a roster standpoint, but from a coaching standpoint, a motivation standpoint, the Raiders are better. So I think the Broncos are in a tough spot. And they're going to have to change the narrative right now, because right now I don't see them being a very good team. But I will say, I do trust Sean Payton, even though he hasn't done a whole hell of a lot right. I do trust Sean Payton. So we'll see if he can, turn this thing around. I think this time next year we'll be talking a lot differently about Denver. I just think we're 1 year away from that. Speaking of the Raiders, The Raiders check in at 13 for me. Um, I don't love their quarterback situation, but from a roster standpoint, the Raiders aren't that bad. They've got some talent on that football team, but clearly it's all about the quarterback position. And right now, they're going to be starting Gardner Minshew, and that's not a good thing. But what I will tell you is Gardner Minshew is going to give you a chance. They're not going to make the playoffs. He's a lot like Ryan Fitzpatrick in the sense that you're probably not going to make the playoffs, but he's going to be exciting. He's going to give you a shot. You're going to be hovering around the postseason. You're just going to miss out on it. I think Antonio Pierce's presence is massive. He instilled hope in that ball club last year. He gave them a reason to believe. He is single-handedly the reason why Devontae Adams is still on that roster. You could argue that he is the reason Max Crosby is still on that roster, and he is the reason that there's still hope in Vegas right now, even though you don't have a quarterback. So I think all of those things I just mentioned, plus Gardner Minshew, you say what you want about him. He's a veteran. He can win you some ball games. He's going to lose you a couple too, but he can win you some ball games. I think all of that is enough to elevate them over a team like Denver in these rankings. And so I got the Raiders slightly ahead of the Broncos at 13. Checking in at 12 is the team Gardner Minshew came from last year and almost led to the playoffs in the Indianapolis Colts. Now, they're a wild card here because if Anthony Richardson stays healthy, and that's a big, big if, it's a big, big if. If he stays healthy, the Colts could be dangerous. He's got a ton of talent. And they've got some talent around him now. And they've got a healthy JT. He was not healthy early last season. He was disgruntled last season as well. But they got all of that stuff behind them. And they've got more receivers. They've got tight ends. They've got a lot of stuff. Defensively, they added, I thought, the best pass rusher in the draft. They already had some young guys that were playing solid football on that side of the ball. And I just think the Colts are a dangerous team if they can put it together, but it all revolves around Anthony Richardson. And there's no Gardner Minshew to save you, although they did sign Joe Flacco. My guy, Joe. Cool. So they'll still have a shot to be competitive if Anthony Richardson gets injured again. But the hope is that he stays upright and is able to give the Colts a chance. Whatever the case may be, I can only go off of what I've seen. The sample size is small, and last year it was not pretty. He was hurt early and often, and so I have little to no confidence in Anthony Richardson's ability to stay healthy. If he's healthy, they're a dangerous team. I should assume health here because that's generally like what I like to do, but it's hard for me to just dismiss his injury situation. And it's such a small sample size. It'd be different if this man had made it to the playoffs, already in his career, or he's been to the postseason twice, and I know what he's capable of. I'm going to dismiss the injury situation and just say, hey, if he's healthy, that's a playoff team. I can't do that because even in the games where he was healthy, he showed flashes, but again, it's a super small sample size. So he's like a rookie this year, all over again. So it's hard to elevate the Colts, but they're interesting. I wouldn't be shocked if they made the playoffs this year. Wouldn't surprise me one bit. But it's going to start at the quarterback position. They come in at number 12. At number 11, it's the Jacksonville Jaguars. This is pretty low for them. If some of you are wondering, like, damn, Jacksonville at 11, I'll explain myself as we continue to go through this list, but I was pretty disappointed in how they played last year. Um, and I didn't love everything that they did this offseason. I think they've done some things that leave a little to be desired. That said, um, I'm anxious to see what they're able to do now that they're no longer the hunted in that division. You know, after winning the division, making it to the postseason, they came out of the gates last year like gangbusters. And they played really well to start, and then they faltered. He got injured, he being Trevor Lawrence. They faltered a bit, and they lost their confidence. They lost their juju, and they lost some players, most notably um, Calvin Ridley, who went to the Titans this offseason. And so they signed um, Gabe Davis, but he's kind of a one-trick pony. So I'm interested to see what the Jaguars are able to do offensively. Defensively, can they take steps towards getting where they need to be? Because I didn't think they were great defensively last year either. So I wonder about them, so much so that I think other teams have bypassed them clearly, as they're at 11 right now. And they're going to have to prove it to me all over again. Trevor Lawrence is going to, I like Trevor Lawrence. I do. But they're going to have to prove it to me all over again. I just, right now, they're sort of an enigma for me. And this is less about Jacksonville. It's more about the teams around them that I just think right now they're just better than Jacksonville. Either better coached, better quarterback, better personnel, or all of the above. So they come in at 11. At number 10, it's the Cleveland Browns. And I was very close to pushing them up one more spot. I really just want to see Nick Chubb healthy. I saw him squat in a small house the other day, so he looks like he's back. Him weight training was never an issue. It's just staying healthy on the football field, going back to his days at Georgia. If he's healthy, the Browns are a problem because defensively, they were one of the better defenses in the league last year. However, I still am not sold on Deshaun Watson in a Browns uniform. And that's what's pushing them down this far on the list. I just don't know what to make of Deshaun Watson. He's winning football games, but there's like a confluence of things that are transpiring for him to win these games. Inclement weather, bad opponents, great defense, things of that nature. Like, it's not, he had one game, and I keep harping on this, and I sound like a broken record, but he had the one game against the Ravens on the road in a comeback victory where you go, okay, maybe this is the one that's going to kind of spark him and get him going in Cleveland. But shortly thereafter, like always, he got hurt, right? He's been in Cleveland now for 2 seasons, and he's been pretty much a non-factor. Obviously, in year 1, due to suspension, and in this past year, due to injury. We still don't know what he is in Cleveland. And right now, anybody watching this Brown situation from afar is looking at the Deshaun Watson trade and then subsequent contract as a bust right now. They are not getting their money's worth out of Deshaun Watson. And he's got the highest cap number in the NFL currently. So they got to figure out something. But they figured out that they can play really good defense. And if Nick Chubb is healthy, they can run the football. You put those two things together, then the play action works for Kevin Stefanski. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to move him up. Stefanski has won head coach of the year 2 times in the last 4 years. So he knows clearly what he's doing. Him winning um, enough playoff game, enough regular season games to qualify for postseason ball last year was a testament to him overcoming his circumstances with all the injuries. They started what 4 different quarterbacks last year? Watson, um, the rookie, DTR, the quarterback that was in Carolina that played in the USFL or the XFL, one of those 2 leagues, and then obviously Joe Flacco. So to still make the playoffs, having that kind of turnover at the quarterback position speaks volumes. But that was last year. That's not this year. You're gonna have to have Deshaun Watson play better. Right now, I got the Browns at number 10. Coming in at number 9 is the Miami Dolphins, and or are the Miami Dolphins, and I was close to swapping these 2 teams. The Dolphins and their inability to be tough in cold weather and to be physical when physicality is required bothers me to no end. They're the anti-Cleveland Browns. Cleveland is a physical, hard-nosed team. They play well in inclement weather. If it's cold, you don't want to see the Browns. The Dolphins are quite the opposite. They want a clean, fast track. They want to outscore you. They want to outrun you. They want to outgun you. But you drop those temperatures below 40 and they want no smoke. They want no problems. We saw that last year time and time again. And over the last couple of years, we've seen them not play well. They went to Buffalo 2 years ago, late in the season, with the division on the line, got smoked, right? Cold in December. Yeah, we'll pass on this one, right? Got spanked. Went to Kansas City last year. Look, it was really cold. I'm not going to sit here and act like I watched somebody take a cold beverage out of a refrigerator and immediately it froze, right? Like it was ridiculously cold, below 0 last year in that wild card game against the Chiefs. But they didn't want to play football. Like they did not want to play in that game. And like I can't say that I blame them, but it's the constant lack of physicality in those type of environments that worry me. But they're getting some of those defensive players who got injured last year back. They added some defensive players via the draft. We know how explosive and dynamic they are. I also think that Tua puts a cap similar to Derek Carr in New Orleans. I think Tua caps what you can be, right? There's only so much you can do with Tua being your quarterback. Not that he sucks, but there's a ceiling, right? You're going to need the rest of the team to step up and elevate their play. Tua's not going to lift you to new heights. So I think there is that exists, but adding Odell Beckham Jr. to an offense that was already dynamic is interesting. But what it ultimately boils down to is, can they get enough stops? Can they play enough defense? And can the offense sustain itself and continue to be dynamic and explosive down the stretch? They struggled offensively. It's almost like teams figured them out. They had some injuries. And so it's important that their offense continue to score and be the catalyst. But Vic Fangio's defense struggled down the stretch. He's no longer there. You got a new defensive coordinator in Anthony Weaver coming over from Baltimore. And we'll see what he's able to implement. And if he gets that defense to play good ball, the Dolphins could easily elevate themselves on this list. But right now, I've got them at 9. Checking in at number 8 is the Los Angeles Chargers. So this is my dark horse team in the AFC to make some noise, because wherever Jim Harbaugh goes, winning follows. I've talked about this already. And it's not like he's walking into a situation where he's got to go in there and he's got to fix a bunch of things and he's got to figure out the quarterback position. He's walking in, which is why he took this job. He's walking into a situation where they've already got good players. He's already got the recipe, right? He's already got the template for what he wants to accomplish. Brought some guys from Michigan with him, took a bunch of players from the Ravens roster from his brother who exude physicality, and went out and got Lad McConkey, a guy that's going to be able to get open. And you already see where this is heading. They're going to run the football. They're going to be a physical football team. Justin Herbert is going to be able to play off of that and be able to manage the game a little bit more. They needed Justin Herbert to be Superman at all times. And despite his best efforts, he usually fell short, and not because he didn't do enough. Simply put, he'd score 30, 33, and the defense would give up 37 and they'd lose. But I think now with Harbaugh, it's going to be a much more conservative approach. They're going to run it. They're going to play defense. Herbert's going to make timely throws. And I think they're going to be a load to deal with this upcoming season. The biggest question is, do they have enough weapons offensively? That's the one thing you have to ask yourself with the Chargers is, do they have enough weapons, right? But the reason I have the Chargers over a team like the Dolphins is sheer physicality. They can beat you up. The Dolphins cannot, right? The Chargers will punch you in the face with Jim Harbaugh. And you're going to see that right out of the gate. And with Harbaugh, you also have a coach with experience winning at every level, including the NFL. He's been to a Super Bowl. That matters. And then you throw in a top 5 quarterback, what I believe is a top 5 quarterback. I think you got the makings of a dangerous team in the Los Angeles Chargers. So I expect them to make some noise right away in Harbaugh's first season. So I've got them in at number 8. Checking in at number 7. And I kind of alluded to this yesterday. I hinted at the fact that the Bills were going to tumble a bit. They're still at number 7, which would make them a playoff team, technically speaking. But as we know, that's not how it always goes. You can have all 4 of your teams now. Once upon a time, you couldn't. Now you can. So technically speaking, if I've got them at 7, that means I still see them as a postseason team. And look, it's just hard for me to see the Bills and Josh Allen and not have them be a playoff team. But they lost a lot, man. Good grief. It was a rough offseason. Trading away Stephon Diggs, Gabe Davis leaving in free agency. I know a lot of fans are like, good riddance, right? But okay, cool. You still lost another weapon at receiver. Mitch Morse, the center, is gone. There's no more Tre'Davious White, and I know he's been battling injuries here of late anyway, but still another piece gone. Your veteran safety tandem has now been broken up. You're hanging on by a thread there. Von Miller is on a milk carton. His career could be over. I don't know if there's going to be some Von Miller resurgence here. You still can't get after the quarterback consistently, which was the reason you brought Von Miller in the first place. So it just feels like there's a number of questions for the Bills, and there's just not enough answers right now. Maybe Josh Allen is the answer to everything, right? We don't know if they have good enough receivers, Josh Allen. Well, they got great tight ends and a really good running back just Josh Allen. What about the defense, man? They got some issue, Josh Allen. Maybe he's the answer. I don't know. We're going to find out. I told you yesterday, I get a little nervous when I turn to Josh and I say, hey, Josh, I need you to put that cape on. And he's like, bet. Sometimes he does a little bit too much. I get nervous. Is Josh going to do enough to help them win without hurting them? Or is he going to try to do too much and it ultimately ends up backfiring and being counterproductive? Only one way to find out, but I'm a Josh Allen guy. My money's on Josh to figure it out. But in the meantime, I just think they're teams that are better than them, or at least better positioned than they are right now. Keep in mind, they play in a really tough division, so that doesn't help either. Sans for the Patriots, the Dolphins are a problem. The Jets, I think, are going to be a problem if Rodgers is healthy, and then we'll find out if they're up to the task or not. But a lot of questions with the Buffalo Bills. We'll see what happens. Um, Checking in at 6 are the Pittsburgh Steelers, and I may get a little grief for this, and that's fine because I am a Mike Tomlin guy through and through. You cannot deny what Tomlin has done throughout his career. Ever since Roethlisberger has left, it's been a revolving door at quarterback. There has been little to no consistency, and yet this man has found ways to win football games. Steelers fans don't want to hear it. They don't care about him not having a losing season in his career. They haven't won a playoff game since the Obama administration, and they are not happy right now with. And you know what? They might not have won a playoff game. No, that's too far back. I was about to say since the Bush administration. It's been a long time, but no, it was somewhere in that Obama administration. Maybe the first term is the last time they won a playoff game. It's been a long time, uh, but they get there, and that I just said that with Dak. Like we can kill Dak for his lack of postseason success, and that's fine, but you still got to get to the playoffs. And the Steelers are usually in position to make the playoffs, or they make it. They just don't do anything when they get there because they don't have enough at the quarterback position. Enter in Russell Wilson. Now, look, again, I may get killed for this, but I think there's still something left in that tank. What is left? I don't know, right? But Russell Wilson has something to prove. He must have a chip on his shoulder because this could be his last opportunity to prove he's not washed. There's Justin Fields knocking on the door behind him like, "Hey, let me in." If you're Russell Wilson, you have to keep him at bay. We know what they do defensively. We know who they are. We know what they have. You know that's going to keep them in ball games. And offensively, they're establishing an identity with their running backs. They have a legitimate number one wide receiver now. And, Deontay Johnson was cool, but he was inconsistent. He had gotten his shit together, but he's no George Pickens, right? So they got a guy now. They got Pat Fryermuth and a number of tight ends. I think they got enough to be a problem. And if Russell Wilson gives them anything, the Steelers are a playoff team, and you're going to have to deal with them because there's a level of physicality that they play with, and they find ways to get it done. And again, that's the hallmark of Mike Tomlin and that staff. So again, it's not sexy with the Steelers, but they just know how to get it done. And there's a level of respect that comes with what Mike Tomlin has been able to accomplish for well over a decade. So they're at number 6 are the Steelers. And they play in a very tough division. And this is one of those instances where iron sharpens iron. Like when you play in a division with a realistic chance of all 4 teams making the playoffs, I mean, literally, it would have happened last year if Joe Burrow doesn't get hurt. It makes you better. If you're able to stand up to that task, it makes you better. I think the Steelers are one of those teams. They're going to be able to compete at a high level because of the division they play in. It prepares them for all the other teams around the league, so to speak. Now we get to the creme de la creme, the best of the best in the AFC. And the Texans are at 5. And I want to believe in the Texans, which is why I have them at 5. I want to believe in CJ Stroud. I want to believe in DeMeco Ryans. I want to believe in them pushing their chips to the center of the table and going for it, trading for Stephon Diggs, signing Danielle Hunter, doing all of the things that they've done this offseason to fortify the roster and give them a realistic shot at making some noise in the AFC. It all revolves around CJ Stroud, obviously, but they've built a better roster around him this year, and they're going for it. They play in a division that will allow them the space that they need to compete at a high level and figure some things out. Again, there are some factors that could change the trajectory of this Texans team within their division. If Anthony Richardson is healthy, that changes the Colts in fundamentally how they play and who they are. If Will Levis is decent, the Titans could be ahead of schedule, right? And then obviously the Jags are like, hey, don't forget about us. We did win the division back in 2022, and we did start off hot in 2023 before faltering down the stretch. Like, we're not dead. These are all true statements, but I believe in what the Texans are, I believe in what they're building. And obviously everything revolves around CJ Stroud. And you know I'm a big do it again guy. So I'm going to challenge him to do it again. If he does it again, the Texans are one of the 5 best teams in the AFC. If he doesn't, if he takes a step back, then obviously they're going to take a step back and they're going to tumble down this list quite a bit. It's hard to sustain what he did a season ago, but if he's one of those dudes, right? If he's one of those chosen few, and there's not many of those dudes, if he's cut from a different cloth and it seemed as if he was a season ago, if he's different, it's nowhere but up for them. If he turns into a Joe Burrow type, Patrick Mahomes type, a Josh Allen type, the Texans are here to stay, and you have to deal with them. We're going to find out this year because he's the key. He's going to be the key. They got Joe Mixon in the saddle. As I mentioned, they're going for it. We'll see what they're able to do. And it's a little bit different when you're off the grid. They were off the grid last year. Nobody was checking for the Houston Texans. They were an afterthought. What they did at the beginning of last season was cute. Oh, the Texans are, the Texans are 6-6. That's cute, man. The Texans are 3-3. The Texans are 2-1. The Texans are whatever. Oh, that's cute. That's nice. DeMeco Ryans is doing a really good job, man. He should get a couple of votes for head coach of the year. That's the kind of stuff we were saying, right? The throwaway lines towards the midpoint of the season. Oh, the Texans, that's a nice story, man. That's real cute. It wasn't cute at season's end. They were for real. It's different when now you have the target on your back. Jacksonville found that out last year. It's not the safest at the top where you're now the hunted and everybody's looking at you like food. You're now prey instead of the predator. Let's see how the Texans handle this. I'm interested. They're at number 5. Checking in at number 4, it's the New York Jets. I've already said my piece on the Jets. If Rodgers is healthy, that's a damn good roster they've assembled. And they went out and got more pieces this offseason. They went and got a future Hall of Fame left tackle to fortify the offensive line. They traded for Morgan Moses to fortify the right side of the offensive line. So they've got bookend tackles now. and Tyron Smith and Morgan Moses. They've got depth on that offensive line. They've got substance on that offensive line. We know about the running back position with Breece Hall and all of those guys. They got weapons at the receiver position. They got stuff at tight end. Defensively, they're one of the best teams in football. There's not many weaknesses on this Jets football team. If Aaron Rodgers is Aaron Rodgers and he's healthy. That's the biggest question. If he's healthy and he's still Aaron Rodgers, the Jets are one of the best teams, not just in the AFC, but in football. If there's regression, if he's not healthy, it's the same old Jets. And this whole conversation is a moot point. But I'm assuming health, unlike I did with the Colts. There is no body of work with Anthony Richardson for me to assume health and know what I'm getting. There's a body of work with Aaron Rodgers that if he's healthy, I can assume what I'm getting. So if Rodgers is healthy, I know what he's capable of. I can then extrapolate what the Jets are going to be. Just look at their season last year and all of the ball games that they were in with a chance to win with Zach Wilson or someone else at quarterback. And it was bad last year, by the way. Some of the worst quarterback play in the league resided in New York with the Jets. Think about all the games that they could have won with just a semblance of quarterback play. Not a future first ballot Hall of Famer, just a semblance of quality quarterback play. Again, it's all around Rodgers. Rodgers is healthy. Rodgers is still good. The Jets are really good. Checking in at number 3 is the Baltimore Ravens. And I know it's a little hard to see. Let me retool that. And give it a little bit of flavor because it's definitely hard to see. Let's go with that. Let's turn that down some though. No, let's not do that. We'll just leave it like that. Ravens are checking in at 3. We know what Lamar Jackson is. They lost their defensive coordinator, Mike McDonald. They added Derrick Henry. They lost a couple of receivers, but they still got their tight ends. You're relying on some younger receivers like Rashad Bateman and the Boston College receiver. I don't know why I'm blanking on his name, but he was outstanding last year. Zay Flowers, right? So you're relying on younger receivers. So we'll see how that turns out. Bateman hasn't been able to stay healthy early in his career, but they've got talent. The question is, defensively, can they pick up where they left off last year? And can Lamar Jackson stay healthy? He did last year. We saw the end result, league MVP. And can he take that next step, which is not only dominating in the postseason, but having it translate to success in the postseason? I think we've gotten to the point now with the Ravens, similar to the Dallas Cowboys and Dak Prescott, where the regular season has become a formality. It's cool. Hey, nobody's really buying what you're selling. Don't care how good you play in the regular season. You could go undefeated, and people are still going to ask the question, but what about the postseason? Because that's where it counts, and that's where it's going to matter for a team like Baltimore, who's had all of the regular season success one can ask for. They've had the number one seed twice in the last 5 seasons and have done absolutely nothing with it. You know, they did make it to the AFC Championship game this time. At least they didn't get bounced in the divisional round like they did the last time they were the number one seed and had a first round by Tennessee. So at least they did win a game against Houston. It wasn't pretty, and if Houston was prepared to slay, a giant, they could have lost that game because they were uptight and they didn't play well, especially in the first half. But they play in a tough division, as I mentioned. Iron sharpens iron. They're not afraid of the rest of the division. I don't think though they were the biggest beneficiaries of no Joe Burrow. If Joe Burrow's healthy, it's their division to lose. They are being Cincinnati's. Can they flip the script and change the narrative and make it their division no matter what? We haven't seen a season in which both Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow were both healthy for the duration of the season ever, I think. Burrow was injured his rookie season. Jackson didn't finish Burrow's second season when he went to the Super Bowl. Jackson didn't finish Burrow's third season when he went to the AFC Championship game. And in Burrow's fourth season, um, he didn't finish, and Jackson did. And he went to the AFC Championship game. So we still really haven't seen what it looks like when both quarterbacks are completely healthy. The closest we got was Burrow's second year when he went to the Super Bowl. Jackson didn't finish the playoff game against Buffalo, but he did play the vast majority of that regular season, and the Bengals were the better team that year. So until they're able to show that they can beat Cincinnati when they're healthy, I still got to take the Bengals in that situation. But I want to see what Derrick Henry adds in terms of offense and identity, and does he give them a different dimension? Does he unlock something within that offense and that rushing attack, or is it fool's gold? Are we foolish for thinking that Derrick Henry at this advanced stage of his career is going to come in and give them, this massive boost over what they had before with Gus Edwards and company? Only one way to find out. But the Ravens are very interesting. Defensively, can they pick up where they left off without their defensive coordinator? And they lost Anthony Weaver too, who was a strong presence there defensively for them. And can Lamar and Derrick Henry take that offense to new heights and make them a Super Bowl contender once again? We'll see, but they're the third best team in the AFC. Checking in at number 2 is the Cincinnati Bengals. I've pretty much explained to you why they're number 2. Joe Burrow is that guy. He's that dude. When he's healthy, he changes things. They almost made the playoffs last year without him. They're solidly coached. They're good defensively when they're healthy. They got weapons on offense. I mean, I don't know what else I need to say, right? I think they did some more damage in the draft this year. They got more talent. This will be the last year of T. Higgins. So they got to take advantage of that. But they drafted, one of my favorite receivers out of Alabama. And I think he's going to come in there and he's going to be a problem right away. And I know there's no more Joe Mixon. They feel like they've got enough weapons on offense and guys in that backfield, probably most notably Brown, to pick up the, you know, the slack there. I look at the Bengals and I see the best team in what is arguably the best division in football. I see them being the best team in that division when healthy. And so until otherwise notified, you give me a healthy Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins. That defense, Hendrickson and Hubbard and Hilton and all those guys. You give me that defense with Joe Burrow and company on offense, I take my chances. Anywhere, anytime, against anyone, and that includes the number one team on this list. They're the only team that is not afraid of the Chiefs. They're the only team that can look Kansas City and Patrick Mahomes in the face, eye to eye, and say, you really don't want this smoke. It's the one team that Mahomes respects. We watched quarterback last year. We saw what Mahomes said when his dad asked him, hey, who would you rather face? He started with the politically correct answer, doesn't matter to me, but he said, nah, I really want Cincinnati. That's the only team I've never beaten in my career. I really want them. And up until that point, postseason and regular season, he had never beaten Joe Burrow. And one could argue if Joseph Osai doesn't have that ridiculous, late hit out of bounds on Mahomes, you could argue the Bengals were going to beat them again. That game was going to overtime. And if Burrow doesn't throw that interception, they probably win that game. Straight up. So I'm just telling you, the Bengals are legit. And no other team in the conference can say, hey, we own Kansas City. Nobody else can say that. Ravens can't say that. Jets can't say that. Although the Jets did beat the Chiefs last year. They don't own them, right? Texans can't say that. Steelers obviously can't say that. Bills have chief problems, even though the Bills know how to beat them in the regular season. When it counts and it matters most in the postseason, the Bills have no answers. The Chargers, that's a different story, and I think that could be the biggest, issue within the division for the Chiefs. But when you're talking about in the conference, the one team that is fully capable and unafraid nor phased by the Chiefs, the Cincinnati Bengals. They come in at number 2. And I don't have to say this, but I'm going to say it. It all boils down to the health of one Joseph Burrow. He's healthy. Bengals are in great shape. He's not. All bets are off. And you know who number 1 is. The Kansas City Chiefs. Come in at number 1, the 2-time Super Bowl defending champions head the list at number 1. Here's the scary part. They got better this offseason. If you can believe that. They were vulnerable last season. I said this a million times. They were vulnerable last season, and the Ravens and Bills and 49ers all let them off the hook. Offensively, they were compromised. They didn't score a lot of points during their postseason run. It was all about their defense and the ability to take care of the football, run the football, not make the critical mistake. A lot of times they just let the other team implode. Case in point, the AFC Championship game against Baltimore. They just kind of moved out of the way and just let the Ravens fall apart. They literally just let the Ravens fall apart at the seams. They just moved out of the way. The Chiefs retooled this offseason offensively. Hollywood Brown, drafting Xavier Worthy. They've gotten exponentially faster with better hands, guys that can actually catch the football. Defensively, they did lose a big piece in L'Jarius Sneed. We'll see what the impact is there. But if there's one thing I can say the Chiefs have done really well, is they've developed guys in the secondary. And there's no shortage of talented defenders back there. It's just, can the next guy step up and just be solid? But they've developed talent on that back end. So much so that they've allowed some talent to walk out of that building like Juan Thornhill. They can do that because they adopt the next man mentality, next man up mentality. And they got the best nickel corner in the league right now. They're a dangerous team. Re-signed Chris Jones, re-signed Travis Kelce. The biggest blip for them right now is Rashid Rice's behavior. But they've got so much depth at receiver now that they could withstand him missing 4 games on a league sanction in terms of them suspending him to send him a message. Don't even know if that's going to happen or not. Whatever the case may be, as long as Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes are in Kansas City as a tandem, they're going to be hard to beat. And until somebody beats them, they are the champions and they are the best team in the AFC. So that is my AFC power ranking. Let's get to your comments. See what you guys have to say. Start the night off with my guy, Christopher McLaughlin. My guy, Chris, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Chris, writes, hey, Lou, hope all is well with you and the family. Likewise, as always, really, truly appreciate you. Writes 3 questions. 1, who is your top pro athlete of this century and why? 2, do you think CJ Stroud can be a top 5 quarterback in this league after this season? And 3, do you expect Jaden Daniels to be on this list next year? So who is my top athlete, pro athlete of the century? How is it not LeBron James or Tom Brady, right? It's got to be one of those 2 guys. No one has won more in either of their sports. No one has been more dominant in either of their sports. I don't see how it's not one of those 2 guys. There's no other players that compare in the 21st century. Brady was doing it since what? Almost the turn of the century. Brady started in what? 2001, I believe. Brady won in 01, 02. They didn't win it in no. They won it in oh yeah, 01, 03, and 04, right? That was the 3 out of 4. And we know he's won 7 Super Bowls. 6 with the Patriots, 1 with the Buccaneers. Went to the AFC Championship game some ridiculous amount of times in a row. It felt like won the AFC East like 11, 12 years in a row. It's the same shit the Chiefs are currently doing. But it was just with um, more success. But Mahomes is, rapidly, you know, catching up now. He's got 3 Super Bowls now, and he's been to what did we count? 7 consecutive AFC Championship games. Last year was the first time he played a road playoff game. Let that sink in. We talked about that. Year 7 was last year, right? He was a rookie in 2017, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. Year 7, year 6 as a starter, year 7 in his career was the first time Patrick Mahomes played in a road playoff game. Not because he hadn't been in the playoffs. Man was in the playoffs every single year of his career as a starter. The first time he played in a road playoff game was last playoffs. And then he went on the road and beat not just the Buffalo Bills, but also the number 1 seeded Baltimore Ravens. So, yeah, he's on his way, and he may ultimately overtake Brady. But for right now, it's Brady or LeBron. LeBron is still currently writing, his book. He's been doing it over 20 years. I think whomever you choose as your athlete has to have longevity. He's got to be dominant. Um, I think Serena Williams is probably in that conversation too, for her reign of dominance over the sport of tennis on the female side. Um, I think it's those 3 in particular. I can't think of anybody else who was as dominant as those 3 were for as long as they were. Even in tennis with males, Federer and Jokic, Djokovic, they split it, right? Like there's there were like 2 or 3 of those guys that were really good. Um, I think I'm missing one of them too. Um, Nadal, right? Federer, Nadal, and Novak Djokovic. So all 3 of them were really good. There was nobody else during Serena's reign in women's tennis. So she was dominant. So I'd add her to the mix, but I probably would give the nod to LeBron. Probably have to say LeBron. 20 years and counting. He holds almost every record known to man in the NBA, including most points scored. Um, I don't know if he'll win another championship, but when he plays, he goes to the playoffs just about every year. And there was a run there in the East when he was in Cleveland, Miami, and then back to Cleveland, where it didn't matter. You knew you had to go through LeBron if you wanted to go to the finals, and you weren't going to beat him. You could forget about it. There was a stretch there where all roads in the East came through wherever LeBron was. That type of power is rarely wielded in sports, where wherever you go, the balance of power shifts to that particular team. That was LeBron James. He goes to Cleveland, gets drafted by his hometown team, the Cleveland Cavaliers. The Cavaliers become one of the best teams in the league. They go to the NBA Finals. They can't get over the hump. He goes to Miami. Obviously, they go to the finals, lose to the Mavericks. Then after that, they go on a tear, right? He goes back to Cleveland after that dissolves, and he wins a championship there. And all the while, that entire time, no other team advanced to the NBA Finals but the team LeBron James was on. I mean, you could say the same thing for Tom Brady a lot of the time as well, but I'd say it's LeBron James right now. You could make a strong case, though, I think, for any of those three: Serena, Tom Brady, or LeBron James as the best pro athlete of the 21st century. Two, do you think CJ Stroud can be a top 5 quarterback in the league after this season? If he does what he did last year, yes, absolutely. As you can see, there's a spot currently available at 5. Nobody is like grabbed it. I think Herbert right now is in the best position to do so because of, the body of work he's put forth in terms of the play on the field and what we've seen from him. But if Stroud does what he did last year, leads the Texans to the playoffs, has another tremendous season, can win another playoff game, and even if he doesn't win a playoff game, he just gets there. I think there's something to be said about that, and I think at that point, you slot him right behind Lamar Jackson at 5, and I think he's there comfortably at that point. As the only reason that I have a problem with Stroud being ahead of guys who have done it and are still doing it is he doesn't have multiple years. I've seen guys come in and have great rookie seasons or really good seasons that encourage you. Baker Mayfield had a really good rookie campaign that encouraged you. Robert Griffin III won Rookie of the Year and looked like he was about to be the face of the NFL potentially. Cam Newton had an incredible rookie season, albeit 6 wins or whatever it was. And not that he fell off a cliff the next year like some of the other guys I just mentioned. Mayfield didn't have a good second year. Robert Griffin III never matched the level of play he had in his rookie season. We saw other guys have, really good starts to their career and not be able to consistently meet that level of play. I don't think that is going to exist for Stroud, but he's still got to go out and do it. And as I mentioned when I was talking about the rankings, the Texans are going to be the hunted now. It's one thing to do it when nobody's paying attention, when you're under the radar and there are no expectations. CJ Stroud, there's expectations now from external forces and internally. He knows, but if he plays well again, yeah, he's top 5 for sure. It's all about you replicating what you did so that we know that last year wasn't a fluke. That's all it's about at this point. If he can do that, there's a spot in the top 5 with his name on it. Unless Justin Herbert one-ups him and goes to the AFC Championship game or the Super Bowl or something crazy like that, right? Then Stroud, just making it to the playoffs back-to-back years to start his career, it won't be enough because now Herbert has said, hey, that's my spot. They were just keeping it warm for me, right? Or in my estimation, he's there now, and he's like, yo, bad bat. Matter of fact, I'm trying to move up this joint. But the beauty of, and I heard Dan Orlovsky say this, the beauty of the quarterback position in the NFL, and we haven't been able to say this in quite a while. As a matter of fact, let's go back to the list real quick. Look at this list and look at how many young quarterbacks are on it. The NFL is in great hands. I can't remember the last time the quarterback position was in such great hands with young quarterback. A lot of times it's veteran quarterbacks. It's Roethlisberger, it's Manning, it's Brady, it's Breeze. These are the guys occupying these spots. Rodgers, guys that you're like, hey, ain't you 30 something already? He's like, yeah, but I'm just 31 though. I'm still young. Nah, we got a bunch of 20 somethings running around here, running the league, right? Mahomes still in his 20s, Burrow 20s, Allen 20s, Jackson 20s, Stafford's an older guy, Rodgers is older, Herbert's 20s, Stroud is a puppy, Golf probably he's got to be teetering on. He's probably 30 now. He's probably 30, 31, somewhere in there. And Prescott's up there in that 30, 31, 32 range. So him and Golf are close. I think Prescott was 16 and they might have been in the same draft, matter of fact. Golf was the 16 draft. I think Prescott was as well. I think him and Zeke came in 2016 together. So, I mean, you look at the top 10 by the exec scouts and coaches. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of the 10 guys are under the age of 30. And then the honorable mentions, all of these dudes, sans for Kirk Cousins, is less than 30 years old. So the league is in really good hand. And then there's a bunch of young guys that are coming in like Caleb Williams and, Jaden Daniels. And we had 6 first-round quarterbacks this year. I mean, only one of them may not see the field until he's 30, right? The rest of them are puppies, and they're going to see the field, and we're going to see what they can do. And if they're any good, they could be infiltrating this list in 2 years, and they'll be 23 and 24 and 25. So the league is in really good hands in terms of quarterbacks. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But assuming that Stroud has a similar type of success and nobody around him like Herbert or someone like that has an extraordinary season to keep him from cracking the top 5, yeah, he could definitely be in the top 5 next year. And then number 3, do you expect Jaden Daniels to be on this list next year? In an honorable mention capacity, sure, I could see that. I can't see him being like where CJ Stroud is at number 7. That would require Jaden Daniels to move mountains in his rookie season, which is not impossible. It's not out of the realm of possibility. It's just highly unlikely for me. So, yeah, I could see him on the list, but not with a number next to his name. I could see him under the honorable mention. I mean, hell, Brock Purdy has been to the NFC Championship game and the Super Bowl, and he's not even, on the list with a number next to his name. But Brock Purdy was, Mr. Irrelevant, a 7th round pick. Jaden Daniels is the number 2 overall pick in the draft. Different expectations, different skill set. If Washington is good, it'll be because Jaden Daniels is really good. More so than the 49ers are good because Brock Purdy is good. I mean, the 49ers were good with Jimmy Garoppolo, right? Which is why I think Purdy doesn't get the respect that he deserves. But unlike Garoppolo, who was literally in the passenger seat, he wasn't even driving, right? He literally was in the passenger seat working the radio. I watched Brock Purdy in some critical moments say, watch out, I got the wheel. And he got behind the wheel and he drove the 49ers to victories in some crucial playoff games when they had to have it. That Packers game, those final 2 drives, are you kidding me? That was a coming of age moment for a young quarterback who we had questions about. So it'll take a lot for Jaden Daniels to find himself on a list like the one we looked at today. um, or tonight. But I'll tell you this much: it wouldn't surprise me if he's on the honorable mention portion of that list. Wouldn't shock me at all. Duncan Wright, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. My guy, Duncan, thank you for being a member of the MOBB, writes, according to rankings, most of the top quarterbacks are in the AFC. Are they just more of a passing conference? And why the disrespect of Jalen and Brock Purdy? So let's go back to the list. And so you said most of the top quarterbacks are in the AFC. Out of the top 10 quarterbacks, let's see how many of them reside on that side of the bracket. 1, 2, 3, 4. So the top 4 guys are all AFC dudes. 5 at Herbert, 6 at Stroud, 7 at Rodgers. So 7 out of the 10. So that answers your question right there. As you go to the honorable mentions, there are 4 NFC quarterbacks and 2 AFC quarterbacks. So of the 16, 11 out of the 16 are on the, or excuse me, 9 out of the 16. So it's almost 50-50 split when you do it that way, when you add in the honorable mentions. But when you talk about the top 10, it's 7 out of 10. If I were doing it with mine, Stroud and Prescott come out and Purdy and Hurts go in. So you would only be taking out one AFC quarterback and inserting another one because Prescott is an NFC quarterback. So it would be 6-4, not 7-3. So it'd be closer to 50-50 split. But again, we know the disparity between quarterback play right now and where it is. The AFC is where it's at. Like, I'm an NFC guy, but I understand what it is and what it ain't. And the AFC with Mahomes, with Burrow, with Allen, with Jackson, with Herbert, with Stroud, Tua and Lawrence and Watson, even though he's not on this list, and we don't know what Russell Wilson is going to be. Um, that conference is where it's at right now, and we don't know what Anthony Richardson is going to be, but that conference is where the big names and the best of the quarterback position resides right now. But in 3 years from now, it might be a totally different story, right? Totally different scenario. In the NFC has some of these young quarterbacks like Caleb Williams and Jaden Daniels, step up and ultimately become really good. And you continue to see the growth of a Jordan Love and Brock Purdy and guys like that continue to ascend and Hurts and whatnot. And all of a sudden, here comes the NFC. But right now, still the AFC show. So, and the disrespect for Jalen and Brock, I think those two were left off the list because, and I kind of talked about this earlier, they're seen as caretakers for their team's success. Like they're not the drivers of the they're not the drivers of success for their teams their team's winning. Purdy is looked at as a product of his environment, great supporting cast, awesome coaching staff and offense that really accentuates his skill set and hides a lot of his deficiencies. Hurts is on what most people would consider one of the best rosters in the NFL. And, can he carry a team if he has to? I personally think he and Purdy belong in the top 10. They've shown me enough. But again, we'll see. And, for a guy like Hurts in particular, last year was a step back. You look at his numbers statistically, yeah, he regressed a bit, and they didn't finish the season strong. I've again, he had an injury that he downplayed because that's the kind of guy that he is. But he wasn't right. After that Dolphins game when he injured himself, you could tell for the rest of the season he wasn't right. And again, I'm not looking to make any excuses for him, but they started the season 10-1, right? Like it is what it is. Um, he's made the postseason all 3 of his years as a starter, and the defense was putrid last year. Putrid. So it is what it is. It is what it is. Kevin, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Thank you for being a member of the MOBB. My guy, Kevin, writes, Lou, tell me why people so confident in Stroud yet so hesitant on Love. I do get that Love might need more proof. Also, his contract needs to hurry. Your guess? Um, I think so. First of all, Love sat for a while and was in the same offense for 4 years. And it's not like Jordan Love jumped into the saddle last year immediately and started carving teams up. And the Packers were 8-1 last year. And, they had to get hot late and they caught fire at the right time. And he played well. And there were stretches where he was playing well. The upset of Kansas City on a Sunday night. There were some games in there where you go, yo, Jordan Love is was that was this year, right? I think that was this year last year. I mean, that was last year when they beat Kansas City on a Sunday night. I'm pretty sure. I could be tripping, but I felt like they beat um, the Chiefs last year. Um, I'm pretty sure of it. And there were some games when we go, well, hey, look out for Jordan Love. Then there were some games like the Raiders game where you go, that's nasty, right? And there were several of those games where there were eggs laid, and you go, I don't know if he's ready. I don't know if these receivers are ready. But by season's end, he had put it all together, and we saw, what Jordan Love could be in the playoffs at Dallas and even to San Francisco, um, eh, eh, even against San Francisco to a lesser degree, um, rather. But I think with Stroud, it was consistent all season long. Year one, right out of the gate, we had never seen anything quite like that from a rookie. So yes, people were um, a lot more open to the idea that this guy is legit. And not that Jordan Love, I just told you he went toe to toe with Mahomes and outdueled him on a Sunday night. Not that he didn't have his fair share of moments. He went to Dallas and smoked Dak Prescott and the Dallas Cowboys. Um, and I thought he outplayed Brock Purdy for 3.5 quarters. But CJ Stroud went toe to toe with some dogs last year, and it opened people's eyes. You know, there were games where, if not for CJ Stroud, like they went to Cincinnati when Cincinnati was at their best that season. They, started off 0-3 or whatever, and they had, rallied back and won like 5 out of 6, and they had won like 4 in a row, and they were dangerous. And CJ Stroud went to Cincinnati and threw for damn near 400 yards and outdueled Joe Burrow in a back and forth, beautiful shootout and came out victorious. He did the same thing against the Buccaneers. You know, all was lost after Baker throws a touchdown pass with less than a minute to go, and Stroud takes him right back down the field and throws a touchdown pass with 8 seconds left or whatever, back of the end zone to Tank Dell, I believe it was. So, and I think that was over 400 yards passing. I mean, he was out of his mind, right? So I think that's why you see people kind of leaning towards CJ Stroud is like right out of the gate, right out of the packaging, rookie season. He comes in and does these things, wins the division. Granted, it's a lesser division than the one the Packers play in, but still, you can't take that away from him. Won the division, won a playoff game, and showcased the kind of ability that people are like, wait a minute, this kid's got something. And not that Jordan Love doesn't, but Jordan Love did it. It was kind of up and down, and people were like, "Yeah, you better do that. You've been in the league now how many years? You've been in the same offense now how many years? Yeah, you should be doing that." Whereas with CJ Stroud, oh, he just got here and he's doing that already. Sky's the limit. I like you think Jordan Love is dangerous, and if Love does it again this year, people will be singing his praises. Don't you worry. But it's got to be consistent. I think that was the thing that probably was a little off-putting to some, is that it was the lack of consistency for Jordan Love last season. But he'll get a contract eventually. You shouldn't be worried. You know, if you're Green Bay, it would behoove you to get it done sooner rather than later. They know how this business works. But what you also don't want to do is pay him sooner than you need to, and then he's not the guy. I don't think that's how they're thinking. I think they know they got their guy and they're going to pay him. I'd be shocked if he doesn't have a contract before the start of this season. I'd be shocked. Duncan Wright, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Double up. Thank you for doubling up. Who writes, speaking of AFC conference, why do the Commanders suck so much? Hope you're on tomorrow. Man, yeah, I'm going to be on tomorrow. We toast into the season. So if you want to trash talk me tomorrow, you're going to have all night to do it, because we're going to be turning up all night long, all night, all night long, all night, all night. We're going to be turning up all night tomorrow night. So it's a party. Celebrating the off season, and we toasting to the upcoming season. So yeah, I'll be on tomorrow night. But I saw how you just slipped in a little bit of Commanders hate there, man. Hate. That was clever. That was real clever. And it's good to be talking to you while all of your faculties are still in order. That was a good one. That was one of your best ones just now. That was a good one. Anyway, I digress. Let's get to the comment section real quick, see if there's anything here for me. If not, we will get to our final segment of the show. John Wynn writes, the only question is the NFC team, Commanders fans, Seattle Seahawks fans, are we dumb enough to go for it on fourth and short or longer? I'm not sure what you're referring to there, John. Samuel writes, do you think any team will surpass the 72 Dolphins by going undefeated in the regular season and winning the Super Bowl? No, I don't. I mean, we've had teams, approach it. It's just so tough because all it takes is one slip up. And the NFL is set up for parity. The Dolphins did it in a day and age where there weren't as many teams in the league. There were the haves and the have-nots. And I just always think somebody's gonna get you. No matter how dominant you are, you're gonna slip up one game, not have your fastball, and somebody's gonna get you. And as the league continues to expand, the Dolphins did it with a 14-game schedule. Nobody's done it in a 16-game schedule. Obviously, the Patriots came the closest. Now we're playing 17 games, and eventually it's going to go to 18. So it's going to become increasingly harder to be undefeated. It was already tough enough as is at 16. I don't see anybody doing it as the number of games continues to increase. Because remember, That's just regular season. 17 is just the regular. You still got to win. If you win 17 games, obviously you got the first round bye. So you only have to win 3 more games, but that's 20 games without a loss. Somebody's going to get you somewhere in there. So I don't think so. I don't think so. I think the Dolphins are safe. John Wynn asks, is Aaron Rodgers playing? Yeah, Aaron Rodgers is playing. He's already back with the Jets, practicing. He'll be ready to go at the start of training camp. And he was ready to go in the OTAs. He just didn't show up. He didn't want to do it. Brandon Washington writes, what do you make of the rumors about Devontae Adams wanting to play for the Jets? Of course, that rumor was going to surface. His agent has already come out and said there's no truth to any of those rumors, but it's the link between he and Aaron Rodgers. He was just on somebody's show the other day, and it was Kay Adams, Up and Adams. He was on, and he talked about his relationship with Rodgers. And, so there's always going to be that direct correlation there. And he made it abundantly clear that Rodgers didn't make me. I'm a great receiver on my own. So he had to make sure he declared that. But he talked about his love for Aaron Rodgers. They're still really good buddies. And of course they would love to play for each other. And Devontae Adams wants to win. And he'd like to play for a quarterback that's not going to get him lit up like he did last year. So yeah, there's definitely interest from his side of things, but he knows as well it cost the Jets too much, and the Raiders probably not interested in moving him at this point. If they want any chance to do anything, they need Devontae Adams. So yeah, I've heard the rumors, but his agent has already come out and said there's no basis, to those rumors. No substance. Ghost Rider says, how did you interview Logan? I'm surprised. It was a good interview. I enjoyed it. And, I reached out. It took a number of attempts. I'm not the first person to get Logan Paulson on their program. I won't be the last. But it was definitely a fun interview. I enjoyed it thoroughly. He told me he did as well, so that made me feel good. And it left the door open for him to maybe down the road come back and join me on the show. So I hope you enjoyed the interview as much as I did doing it. And I appreciate you for continuing to support. DJ23 writes, with all the stuff we did, I would have loved to have been on the off-season Hard Knocks to see how everything played out. That would have been pretty cool, but similar to I wonder if there are going to be stipulations to that Hard Knocks similar to the training camp Hard Knocks, where if there's certain things that if you don't meet these criteria, you can be forced to be on the show. I think the Giants volunteered to be the inaugural team on the off-season Hard Knocks. I think they volunteered for that because if we go by the training camp criteria, they made the postseason in 2022. So technically speaking, they could have said, no, we don't want to do it. But I think they just said, yeah, no, we'll do it. We don't mind. Because it's not as big of a distraction in the offseason as it is. Like, I think more teams would be willing to do it in the offseason. Unless you have a front office that's secretive, doesn't want teams or cameras meddling in their business and affairs. I think more teams will be open to doing it because you're not really invasive and a distraction. I think that's what most teams fear is the distraction of the cameras and letting people inside your facility as you're trying to, put the roster together, going through practice and in the off season, it's just you and your staff. It's just you and the personnel guys. So it's not that big of a distraction. You're just going about your business and cameras just happen to be there. Whereas if your players are there, They know the cameras are there. There's a little bit of extra going on, and now there's fanfare, and you got people wanting to interview you. I mean, Robert Saleh talked about that a couple of years ago. Like, we want nothing to do with Hard Knocks. Like, it was cool to be on Hard Knocks, but it was a distraction. It was what it was, right? From Aaron Rodgers and Hackett talking shit about um, Sean Payton, which was deserved. Payton's an asshole, but that got some attention, right? And now you get questions from the media about that. Whereas if there were no Hard Knocks cameras and all of that stuff going on, none of that comes to light. People aren't asking you about that stuff. So um, it would have been interesting because we did a lot, but um, I find it hard to believe that a team with a brand new front office is going to volunteer for a show like that. Turning over your entire roster, building a staff, that would be the most intriguing type of situation to follow, but it's also going to be tough to probably get a team to sign up when you're just trying to get yourself into the building and acclimated and get comfortable, and your head spinning, because as we found out, that process is long, it's tedious, and it's very rapid moving. When you get hired as a GM or a coach, you're getting hired in January, right? In certain instances, February. Soon as you get hired, if you're a GM, you got to find your coach if you don't have one. After you find your coach, our GM, when he hired Dan Quinn, when he called him to give him the new, he was at the Senior Bowl. So you're already at the Senior Bowl. You're hiring your head coach. You got to fill out your staff. As you're doing that, you're preparing for the draft. You're preparing for the combine, right? And you're doing all of this is happening simultaneously. It's a lot. So it would have been tough, you know. But I say that, but their cameras, Washington's cameras are rolling, and they got their people in the building, filming everything and documenting everything. That's how we get the commander's logs. So it can be done. It's different when it's catered to your fan base versus the entire world is watching. Because the commander's logs are put out there and anybody can watch, but are Giants fans or Cowboys fans going on YouTube or going on the Commanders website and watching the Commanders log? Are Lions fans, are Patriots fans doing that? If you're on Hard Knocks, it's accessible to everybody. It's in your consciousness now. You're checking for it. So it's a little bit different. But anyway, Ghost Rider writes, will you interview Craig next? I don't know. You just got to tune in to the summer series. I can't tell you who's going to be next. You know, it's just the summer series. I can tell you this much. The next guest is going to be the last guest on the summer series this year. And if I don't get to somebody that you want to see, I'll try and do it next year. This is going to be a staple moving forward that I'll try to execute, with the summer series. I want this to become a thing. I want this to become a platform that people want to be on, right? So start from the bottom, work my way up, and see where it goes. So you just got to tune in to see who will be next up on the show. But I've been pleased with what I've accomplished thus far. So, we'll see. Anyway, got another super chat. This one is from my guy Duncan Wright. Again, thank you for the super chat. Greatly appreciate you. Who writes, I get proof you're a Cowboys fan. Folks, you all be ready. I don't even see. I gave you credit too soon. I don't even know what that comment was about. Can't even tell you what you meant there, but that's my fault. I spoke too soon. I gave you credit for having all your faculties in order tonight, and then you go and make a comment like that where I don't even know what the hell you're talking about. meh, as a wise man likes to say. Meh. Let's get to our final segment of the show and garbage time. So this is going to be very brief, quick to get us out of here. Um, as you all know, training camp is about to be underway. Um, we're getting to that portion of the season where the off season where it's finally getting to close to football, and that means deadlines are starting to come rapidly. The only guy still on a franchise tag to not get a deal, that deadline has come and passed, obviously, is T. Higgins. He's going to play in Cincinnati this year, which is what I suspected all along. Brandon Ayuk has requested a trade, right? Did that yesterday. Commanders fans were up in arms. Oh gosh, we got to go get him. Uh, that means absolutely nothing to me. He can request a trade all he wants. Deebo Samuel requested a trade. T. Higgins requested a trade. Where is T. Higgins right now? In Cincinnati. Deebo Samuel requested a trade last year. Where is he? In San Francisco. Brandon Ayuk requested a trade. Where is he going to be this year? San Francisco, right? You can request a trade all you want, but at the end of the day, you hold no leverage. The 49ers have you under contract. The new CBA puts you in a position where you can't afford to hold out or do anything crazy. If you're a Brandon Ayuk and you want to be paid, which is the ultimate goal, then you got to go play ball. So, um, him requesting a trade is further proof that he feels disrespected and feels like there is no resolution for him right now with the 49ers. But that's all subject to change. All it takes is for the 49ers to come to the table with an offer that he can't refuse or feels good about. And all of this is water under the bridge. He's back in San Francisco, and it's like none of this ever happened. If he doesn't get the deal, if they don't, you know, extend him out and they just let him play under this last year of his deal, then it gets interesting next offseason because if you're the 49ers, you just let him walk, or do you franchise tag him, see if you can't work out a deal, which will probably not happen, and do you then try to trade him like the Chiefs did with L'Jarius Sneed? Um, to me, there's no value in the 49ers trading him. I've said that all along. I don't want to keep harping on it because to me it's a moot point. We already know what it is. That I don't think they're trading him. We've heard that they have no interest in trading him. We heard New England picked up the phone and said, "Hey, what is it going to take?" They don't have any stud receivers in New England, so they were like, "Hey, what is it going to take to get a guy like Brandon Ayuk up off you?" And they were like, "We're not interested. Stop hitting my line." So they've had multiple teams hit him up. They've swatted away all requests or all inquiries at this point. He's not going anywhere. So I think that it's time to put that to rest and just let this process play itself out. See what happens in terms of the 49ers. If they're good this year, then he's not getting traded at the trade deadline, obviously. But if they're not, who's to say, right? Anyway, I digress. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on this installment of the Louie T Network podcast. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys next time. Friday, I will drop a bonus pod episode, but it will not be live. I'll be out of the office. Uh, my birthday weekend is coming up, so to speak. My wife has a weekend planned for me, so I will be out of the office. Thus, I will drop a bonus pod episode for you guys to consume on Friday. The summer series will be on Saturday, and then we will reconvene on Monday on the other side of the weekend and really start to pick up on things, as by that point, most teams will be in camp. You'll probably have the vast majority of veterans showing up for most teams by the time we get to the other side of the weekend. And I'll say midweek, Wednesday, probably 4/5, if not 5/6 of the NFL teams will be in camp, with both rookies and vets having reported. And we're off and we're running at that point. And we'll be ever so close to the Hall of Fame game. And then once that happens, you already know what it is. But until then, I'm your man, Louie T, signing off. You guys have a good one. Take care. God bless. Good night.